Hello, dear listeners. I am thrilled to bring you a very special episode of You Are What You Read about the books that built our souls. Back in 2021, we hosted best-selling author Maggie O'Farrell for a Facebook Live conversation about her then hit novel, Hamnet. And since we last spoke to Maggie, Hamnet has taken the world by storm. And next week, Maggie's story will be a major motion picture starring Paul Mescal and Jessie Buckley and directed by the brilliant Chloe Zhao. Hamnet is the fictional tale of young William Shakespeare, though he is never named. Maggie examines the death of his 11-year-old son Hamnet and the effect it had on the playwright's work. The novel was the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction and the National Book Critics Circle Award winner. In this episode, the very down-to-earth Maggie O'Farrell tells us what it was like to write this book and tell this story, and also what it was like to bridge her life with the life of her characters to make this beautiful, beautiful work of art. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Maggie O'Farrell.
Oh,
hello. How are you doing?
First of all, Maggie, you're a beauty. You are.
Can I just say there's a lot of good hair going on the screen right now, Adriana.
You are a true beauty. And I'm going to tell you, you wrote here, it was quiet. It was bombastic. It was emotional. It was historical. But it had such immediacy in the moment. So can you just share with the readers how you came to this? And it didn't have to get into too much detail, but how you found this story and why you were drawn into it.
It's a book that I wanted to write for a really, really long time. It's one of those books, I don't know if you've had this, Adriana, when you've been writing, but there's something that just lies at your core for many, many years. And I was trying to work out a way for a long time about how to approach it and how to write it. Because I was really lucky in that I had an amazing English teacher at high school. And he told us, just in passing one day when we were studying the play Hamlet, that Shakespeare had a son who was called Hamnet and that he died at the age of 11. Because I don't think that the boy Hamnet, the real Hamnet, is well known enough. I think that he's been consigned to a literary footnote and nobody has ever really given him his due. No one's ever really understood his enormous significance. Because if you read his big sort of 500-page biographies of Shakespeare, Hamlet's lucky if he gets maybe 2 mentions. They mention that he was born and then they mention he was died. And his death is always sort of wrapped up in statistics of how high, child mortality was in Elizabethan age. But the implication is that actually it wasn't that big a deal because lots of children died. And, and that's
Right.
I've always thought, that can't be true. They must have grieved him. You only have to read the play Hamlet thinking about this dead son and you realize this boy was really significant and he was really grieved.
The play, you either fall in love with that play or you don't. If somebody really pressed me, I would say it's my favorite play.
Mine too.
Is it your favorite?
Yeah.
I mean, everything about life that you will ever confront in life is in that play.
Yeah, it is. It's his absolute masterpiece. But and I've always thought that Shakespeare, like you say, he's very mysterious. We know very, very little about him, the man. But it's always seemed to me that in the act of taking the name of his dead son and giving it to perhaps his best play, just for a moment, a flicker, you see him as a human being. You see him as a father, as a grieving father.
I read all the material first and then I dive into the book. And you did not hide what happened in this book. You didn't hide the plot. Like they'll often be like, the boy, there was a boy and read this to find out what happened to him. You were straight up said, this boy died. This is his family. And you even did signposts of facts throughout the book that I thought was really interesting, where you told us exactly where we were and what was happening. And at first I thought, oh, is he a ghost? Is he running through that house? Is he a ghost? And then you realize how real it is. Did you ever in your life use this book, John Dover Wilson's Life in Shakespeare's England?
I don't think I did. I wish I had, though. It looks really good.
Well, as you can see, it's 65 cents, which is...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's quite a vintage. That's a vintage book there.
Impossible to find now.
Yeah.
But it is it's very hard to find actors like this book who do Shakespeare, because it's, and when I was learning Shakespeare, Sister Jean Cleany at St. Mary's told me to get this, and I found it in an old junk store in South Bend, Indiana, no kidding, where I was in school. This was a book that I referred to a lot as I was a playwright, when I was a playwright, but I never, ever saw that world realized like I did here.
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
Elizabethan England, you nailed it, but you also made it very, it was exactly as I thought in my wildest imagination. At the core of this, and perhaps what made me cry the most, was that it's about a man trying to lead his family, and he's an artist. It's almost impossible to be an artist and have a family, isn't it?
I know there's that school of thought out there, and I know I've heard particularly it sort of said to women, that every baby costs you a book, that you can't. I actually find the sort of artistic life and the domestic life quite complementary. I mean, I know, I find that they work quite well together. I mean, certainly for me, it's always lucky. I'm lucky that it's worked quite well, because I'm derangingly adore my children. I think they're the most charming, fantastic people in the whole world. But I do know that there are people who say you can't do it. But I think for every Virginia Woolf, there's a Mrs. Gaskell. It works differently for everybody else. Like everybody.
You're talking about women. I'm referring to him and men being an artist and the center of a or a leader of a family.
Yeah. Well, I think I was trying to always see Shakespeare, because we hear the two words William Shakespeare, and, his name carries so much heft and so much weight. And, he's a literary icon like no other. So that's why I never mention his name in the book. The name William and the name Shakespeare never appears, because I'm asking readers, I think, to forget everything they think they know about this man. And the little we know about him, really, and just try to open yourselves up to seeing him as a human being. I was trying to imagine what he would have been like at the age of 18 when he got married, and he's living in this really quite small rural market town. And obviously he would have, must have been a genius then. And he must have stuck out like a sore thumb. I was trying to imagine what it would have been like to have been his Greek teacher or his rhetoric teacher at the grammar school. I mean, he must have been extraordinary even then. But did he seem like a bit of a wastrel? He probably did, because, it was a society that would have valued strength or, acumen in business or, knowledge of agriculture. And I don't think he had any of those things. Although he did prove to be quite a good businessman, which maybe he did get from his dad.
Well, his work was for the masses. It was pop theater at the time. They were really written for real people, which is something that I loved here, because he was a character without airs. Sometimes I think a little haphazard, clueless, a little ditzy. I
mean, I think that the one thing that really interested me about him when I was researching this book is that he, unlike, say, Johnson and Marlowe, who, both went to university. So Shakespeare only probably had education until about the age of 15. He only went to grammar school. But not only that unlike Johnson and Marlowe, who made sure that before they died, their work was preserved for posterity. Shakespeare had no interest in that at all. He made no effort, even though he had quite many years of retirement back in Stratford with his wife. He didn't publish his work. He didn't put them together. He didn't tidy them up so they could be preserved for posterity. He didn't bother. And the only reason we still have his plays are because of his two friends. So that fascinates me. I think, did he not know his worth? Did he not realize? Did he not value, the plays? Did he not think that actually future generations are going to need this? And that really interests me, because I think either he didn't care or he didn't realize what he'd done. He didn't realize what he'd written.
What do you make of, he poured himself into his plays. He left nothing on the kitchen floor. It was all in there.
I mean, it's interesting. I think what I was trying to be really careful of when I was writing the novel is not to extrapolate too much from his play, not to kind of try and interpret his biography or what I could have filled the gaps, there are so many gaps in his story. And that even, despite the best intentions of the world's most brilliant scholars, they've never been able to join every single dot. But I think we all have to be really careful not to extrapolate that too much from his plays but actually, I mean, I am slightly guilty of that, because the character you mentioned, his father, John Shakespeare, who was, of course, a very successful glover. And I make him into this terrible despot who's quite violent and has a very tense relationship with him. I mean, I have no evidence evidence for that whatsoever. It's quite possible that John Shakespeare was a very nice bloke and he got on really well with William. But I was just thinking about all the sort of angry, thwarted, sort of elderly men like the King Lears or the Coriolanus's or these angry, thwarted men. It's all to do with thwart, because his father is an interesting character. He at the point at which William got married, their family fortunes had taken a huge nosedive because his father had been a very successful glover, but he was too ambitious. His reach was exceeding his grasp, and he wanted to become a wool trader, which wasn't allowed in those days. You had to stick to your trade. So he was illegally trading wool, and he got all tangled up in all these kind of legal problems, and he got fined for leaving what they describe as orgia on Henley Street, and he got fined for not going to church. I mean, all this stuff, and there's all these weird sort of legal battles, and he was hugely in debt. So I just got the image of this man. I just kept seeing a King Lear type, somebody whose ambition was larger than their grasp, in a sense. So that's why I characterized him as that. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, I think because there are so many gaps in Shakespeare's story, and we are so intrigued by all these voids, there are so many theories or conspiracy theories about him. And I read about as many as I could, and I was kind of trying to make a decision about them all. But I think he did. I mean, I'm sure there was probably...
It's the same voice to me.
It's the same voice, and you can recognize. But I'm pretty sure that in any company like the King's Men or the Chamberlain's Men, there was probably a lot of, improvisation or extemporization, and there probably was a bit of input from his friends and his other actors. But I think he wrote them. I do.
I do too. Now,
good. We're agreed.
We agree. If you don't mind, I just would like to read for the listeners just one little area that this slayed me. Then the idea strikes him. He doesn't know why he hadn't thought of it before. It occurs to Hamnet as he crouches there next to her that it might be possible to hoodwink death, to pull off the trick he and Judith have been playing on people since they were young, to exchange places and clothes, leading people to believe that each was the other. Their faces are the same. People remark on this all the time, at least once a day. All it takes is for Hamnet to put on Judith's shawl or for her to don his hat. They will sit at the table like that, eyes lowered, smiles concealed, and their mother will place a hand on Judith's shoulder and say, "Hamnet, can you bring in the wood?" Or their father might come into the room and see what he thinks is his son dressed in a jerkin and ask him to conjugate a verb in Latin, only to discover it's his daughter hiding her laughter, reveling in the illusion, and she will push aside the door to reveal the real son hidden away. Every page has this kind of lyricism to it. The twin trick, I don't think, has ever been more beautifully written in literature or described. And then there's also the love that they had for each other, these two, and how he's worried about her. And it caused for me the greatest dramatic tension in the book. Even knowing where you were going, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time with those two.
Well, I've always been so sad, actually, the idea that, I can't imagine. I mean, I always think the worst horror must be, obviously, for a parent to lose their child. But I think for a twin to lose a twin must be horrifying. My brother-in-law's a twin, and he came to me after reading this book, and he was kind of almost sobbing, and he said, I couldn't bear it, because his idea of losing his twin was too much. And I think, like you say, it's such a potent and common motif in Shakespeare's plays, particularly boy-girl twins who are separate, as in Twelfth Night, they're separated and they think the other is dead. And then, of course, they're magically reunited. And it's so devastating thinking about him writing that, given what happened to Hamnet and Judith was separated by death, but always in Shakespeare's plays, they're always reunited. And, one of the things I found out when I was researching is that the opening night of Twelfth Night was the 2nd of February, which of course would have been the twins' 16th birthday. And, he would have chosen that. So again, you get this kind of odd moment of sudden flicker of seeing him as a person, that hand reaching out from history and saying, these were my children and I wrote a play about them. And at the end, they find each other again. They haven't died. And it's such it sort of explains why we write and why we need plays. We need to write ourselves a different ending. We need to explain things to ourselves. And there is a way, as an artist or as a playwright or as a writer, that you can rewrite your life. You can make it happen how you want it to happen. But of course, it's an illusion because you can't in real life.
Maggie, what do you feel when you walk into a theater?
I don't know what you would say. The three main things that fuel your writing, the things that stoke your boilers. And I would definitely say going to the theatre and talking to friends and probably travel.
Do you live in London?
I live in Edinburgh, actually.
You're in Scotland. Well, Edinburgh, to me, I mean, it's just as big a theater town as London.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lot of folks here who studied Shakespeare, love Shakespeare. I don't know the easiest way to describe this book except to say, you say it.
Well, I think the thing I should say is that I didn't want to write a book that you have to know about Shakespeare to read. I wanted it to be kind of accessible to everybody. So you do not need to know a lot about Shakespeare's writing or about Shakespeare's life at all. But what it's about, why I wanted to write the book is that I feel that the real Hamnet Shakespeare is not well known enough. People don't understand. People don't know about that Shakespeare had a boy who died 4 or 5 years before he gave the same name to his play. And so I wanted to give this boy a voice. I wanted to resurrect him and say, this boy was important. We owe so much to him. Without this child, without his short life and his early death, we wouldn't have Hamlet. And I don't think we would have Twelfth Night.
I don't either, having read it now. So that's why I think it's such a delicious read.
Thank you. That's so nice. I mean, I really enjoyed writing it. I mean, it was very hard, the scenes in the middle where, it's not much of a spoiler to say that Hamlet dies and his mother has to lay him out for burial. And they were actually some of the hardest things I've ever written, just because, putting yourself inside the skin of a woman who's forced to go through that and forced to watch her child die. And actually, when I was coming up to that point in the book, I kept ducking away from it. And I think I just need to go back and fix something in chapter 2. Then I just need to go back. I kept kind of shying away. So, but I knew it was coming. So I knew I had to do it. So it was, but I had an absolute blast writing this book. I mean, actually, there was an awful lot of book-based research, but there was also a lot of physical research as well. So I went to the Scottish borders and I learned to fly a kestrel. And that's literally the most fun thing I've ever done in the name of work. And I planted my own Elizabethan medicinal garden because I wanted to know what it felt like, to get my hands in the soil and to grow these plants. Because you can read in a book, they used comfrey to ease swollen joints. But until you actually get the seeds and you plant them and you protect them from frost and you harvest them, you don't really know what it's like. I wanted to build a bridge, particularly between my life and the life of the women, because the women's lives in those days were so undocumented. There's not much about them at all. So I wanted to really physically experience what it was like to be them.
Well, I love what you did with the women because I felt they were full-bodied.
Oh, good. That's what I was hoping. Thank you.
Full-bodied, interesting, and they were a central part of the world of the novel, where they are not generally when you read the history.
Yeah,
it's very hard to find stuff about
sure.
Period.
I mean, there's a very valid reason why most, say, screenwriters or novelists or biographers will focus on Shakespeare's career in London. I do understand that. But to me, it's always seemed that the biggest sort of drama of Shakespeare's life happened off stage, and that was back in Stratford. And that's the death of his son.
You must have been thinking about this for many, many years, as you said, but did you know what form it was going to take, Maggie? Did you think maybe it was a play? Did you think maybe it was something else? No, you always thought it was
I've never written a play. I don't know. I think obviously it's a really specific skill, which I don't think I really have. I think I like description too much. I think my dialogue is always I think you've got to have the kind of mind that you want to impart everything in the interaction. And actually, I think I don't possibly. I like a bit of prose. I like a bit of description. So I always knew that I wanted to write. No, I didn't. I mean, I put it off for quite a long time. I had a weird superstition that I didn't want to write it before my own son was past the age of 11. Not that there was a huge risk of him contracting the Black Death, but I just found that I couldn't do it. I had a couple of forays into it and then I just thought, no, I can't do this. And so he's now a 6'2", 17-year-old. So he's safely past that, hopefully. But I had this odd thing that kept stopping me from doing it. So I actually wrote 3 other books when I was supposed to be writing Hamnet.
did you write it as you went along writing the other books? Did you make notes? Did you think about it, or did you just wait? You let it churn.
I mean, between those books, I would kind of take my books down off the shelves, and I'd have a look at it, and I'd maybe write a little bit. But actually, when I finished a memoir. I wrote a memoir, and then when I finished that, I sort of gave myself a talking to, and I said, you've just got to do this, or you've got to forget about it. You can't keep, thinking, shall I do it, shall I not? Swithering, they call it in Scotland. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just give it a shot. And I had a look at the file that I had written, and I had about 20,000 words, and I realized I'd started the story at completely the wrong point. So I just ditched that whole thing and started again.
You started again. As I told you, I thought it was lyrical, the beginning of this book, where he's looking for everybody in his family. I thought you just, again, the dramatic tension, which is so, to me, that's the huge challenge of writing a novel, to keep people turning the pages. But you not only keep the pages turning, there's also this sense that you're in this family and that you are suffering with them and grieving with them. And the other sense that of the outsider that he was, the way you painted that, can only come from a writer who's lived that. And I know a little bit about your background. So you know that pain. You know the pain of being from a place and then sort of being ridiculed and ostracized.
Yeah, but I think there's a kind of. I mean, I don't really buy into the idea of the artist as this kind of outsider and this maverick who's cut off from the rest of the world. I think there is an element, but I do think that most writers have always or usually are on the outside looking in. I think you do have to be an observer, however, whatever form that could take. I think there are many, many incarnations of that state, but
I mean, you have straightened me out and everyone out that the artist is not on the fringe necessarily. The artist is in the garden with their hands in the dirt, in the ordinary moments, figuring out life like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
And it happens to be your gift, that your prose are exquisite.
Oh, well, you're very kind. I wish I could just, you could just come and hang out in my study when I'm feeling depressed about writing.
When you come to New York.
Oh, that would be great. I would love that.
Have a great, nice, long dinner and laugh.
And we can talk about curly hair products.
And we will get into the products. All right, my dear. Take care. Stay safe.
And you. Take care, everybody. Bye.